for my template. Okay, so good. So this is Rhemma services. We offer a lot of different services, including the EB1 ability of extraordinary category, which is a first preference. We have the EB2 NIW, which is a second preference. We do a lot of adjustment of status. We also do a lot of EAD application and then asylum cases as well. It just depends on your case, and we've helped a lot of different clients. Today, we have one of our esteemed clients who had an approval with us, and this is not only to talk about the testament of Rhemma Consult, but also more specifically to inspire people who are thinking about this process, right? So what are some of the challenges and what are some of the inspirations and to say that you could continue or look into the possibility of becoming a green card holder permanently here in the US. So that is why we are meeting today. So before we begin anything, I would like Nanama to briefly introduce herself, and then we can get the ball rolling.
Hi, thank you, Manuel. My name is Nanama. I am a doctoral candidate at the University of Arkansas. I'm studying statistics and research methods. I have completed all my coursework. I have finished my qualifying exam, so I'm in all but the dissertation stage, trying to finish up there. And I will talk more about my research and address specific issues as we go along.
Great. This might sound redundant, but how do you feel about the approval notice, and are you satisfied with the outcome?
I am very satisfied with it. I went in not knowing for sure what happened, but I felt very confident with my application after we were done. So I am very happy that it is finally done and I can look forward to the next steps.
Okay. And how did you learn about Rhemma Consult?
So I had a friend forward a flyer. His church was organizing a seminar on the EB2 visa, and it caught my attention because I'd already heard about it. I think otherwise I would not have paid particular attention, but another friend, a colleague here at the University of Arkansas who has graduated, told me that once he was done with school, he hired a lawyer and did this, and so he advised me to look into it. So when I'm done with school, or I could look into it as well. So it caught my attention. So I joined the meeting on Zoom just like this, and you were one of the people, you were the person that was talking. And so I paid attention. I took down your number and your name because you right at the end of the seminar, and then I reached out to that.
Heard about this through a seminar, but what was the deciding factor that, okay, I want to go with Rhemma Consult? Like, why didn't you go anywhere else?
Yeah, so I had that in my back pocket. I remember that my friend that had told me about this whole process had used a lawyer. So I also wanted to check that out and see. So a lawyer was recommended to me. So I reached out with my CV and they said I was a good candidate, viable candidate, I could get this. But then the cost involved was just too much. And they wanted the money upfront. They wanted cash. I was like, I'm a grad student. I'm just earning a stipend. I don't have that much money. So I came back, spoke to you, did a consultation meeting. So I realized that you knew your stuff. You had been the person that had forwarded the poster and invited you to the seminar with the Pentecost church or somebody I trusted. So I knew that he would not just bring just anybody to come and talk who was not trustworthy or knew their stuff. And so I was like, okay, these two people both know their stuff. And the day I have to go with what my pocket can afford. So it ended up being a cost issue.
Okay. Like I said earlier on, I think one of the things that most of our clients have really enjoyed is this balance of cost being very reasonable, with the fact that most of our clients are students or are in the early stages of their career, and then money is a factor in whether they want to move with us. So I'm glad it helped you as well. So what were the features or factors of Rhemma Consults that stood out to you?
The personal touch. So with the lawyer, no fault of theirs, they're busy. It was more of like constantly emailing back and forth, never, and that's fine, that's how it's supposed to do business. But I was going into this very new. I had looked online for information, but I didn't know a lot of what was going on. I was confused about so many processes. And so I really appreciated like having a face to the business, having someone that was willing to answer my questions, someone who was willing to communicate very effectively, was willing to answer my questions, even they seem stupid, because everything I was finding online sometimes seemed very contradictory, but could come to you guys or come to you and ask even the seemingly stupid questions. And so I really appreciated the personal touch, the effective communication, the promptness and responses. And I think I have the day also like knowing the stuff, like even just because you can respond, if you're not responding well, it's not good enough. But you guys were responding well with facts and like with experience, or like, we've done this before, we've done this with somebody else, so it helped to like really reassure my fears.
And that's great to know. One of the things that we try to strive for as much as possible here is the client-centered approach. So I'm glad that you felt the same, and then you could ask all the questions. And I always say that there is no such question as quote unquote stupid, because once it's a question, it's a question. It means you want an answer to it. So this is just me when I was once a teacher. I used to tell my students that, see, there is no such question, and if you have it, most likely half of the class already have it. So I'm glad that it's great to know that we have that environment where you felt comfortable asking all your questions. And so now let's talk a little bit more about your background and your, like, I know before you met us, like what were you thinking about in terms of whether or not approval was guaranteed as well?
Yeah, I think I was going in 50-50. I knew that I could or I could not. One of the main things I was worried about was that I didn't feel like I had a lot of publications, because I felt like looking online and talking to people, that was one of the key things that everybody seems to recommend, have publications and then have citations. Not enough to just have publications, but have citations. But I didn't feel like I had enough of that. I had enough research experience. I liked the work I was doing. I thought it had good impact. I had some conference presentations, but I didn't know if those conference presentations would weigh as much as publications, given that, you don't have citations necessarily on all your conference public presentations. And so I was going in a little 50-50. I knew the work I was doing. I knew like the foundation was there, right? Like I knew the work I was doing was important. I had research experience. I had some conferences, but I'm like, is it enough? Is it enough that it would lead to an approval outright? And so it was just it could go anyway. That's how I felt going. Like it's just about how I packaged it and presented myself. But that was where I needed the most help with.
Sure, that makes sense. Can you tell us about, because one of the things that people get worried about is like, what I'm doing, is it really important? Like, so tell us, give us one of the projects you've worked on and how you think that project has been very impactful in the United States.
I think it's hard because with a PhD, especially, every work you do feels so esoteric, like you get so niche, and so it's just so hard to see the broader impact, right? But I think that if you get out of your bubble a little bit and just look at the broader impact of your field, you can find a way to appreciate how you're contributing to the broader, like the bigger scheme at work, right? So I think one of my projects that you may not think it does a lot is I do a lot of like simulation work. So I'm in air statistics, like I mentioned. And so I'm doing like measurement work where I want to see if we create an exam, right? A test that you give to students, like standardized test. Is it fair for, let's say, two groups of students, males and females, right? And I'm doing simulations where I am changing the sample size. I'm changing the test length. So if you have 10 items or 20 items, I'm changing the percent of items that are fair or not fair, have bias or not. I'm changing the kind of methods we're using to test. And so if you look at that, you'll be like, well, how does that impact anything or anybody? But they're giving recommendations to people who are doing the empirical work, right? Even though we're on the more methodological side, we're giving recommendations to people who are doing the empirical work, so that a researcher who is not as informed, if you just did a test for your class and you have 30, 50 people, you can look at my research and say, does this method hold, even if I have just 50 students? Because I have done the simulations to prove the effectiveness of the methods for different empirical researches. So I know that if you're in a more, how do I say, a more niche, I don't know if niche is the appropriate word, but you know what I'm trying to say, if you're in a more technical field, you may feel like your work is just, you keep drilling down a PhD. Your dissertation at a certain point is just you and your advisor. Sometimes it's just you, not even your advisor. And so it is helpful to realize that, yeah, maybe your work is very technical, but how are people outside going to apply? How is somebody who only does empirical research, who doesn't do simulations? How is somebody in undergrad, going to apply a method that you have drilled down and seen like the bones of it? So I think I also have some empirical research, but I think I really value like talking about the more technical and simulation based research, because it feels scary to think like it doesn't have a lot of, like, on the surface, a lot of impact or a lot of applications.
Definitely, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if I remember correctly, Rhemma service, we have a lot of like packages. I know you worked with a scenario where you and I worked closely on the petition itself. There are some instances that I do the entire writing, but with that of our esteemed client Nanama, it was a collaboration. She would do it, and I would give her the review because of the package she chose back then. And one of the things that I remember was that she was going very, very technical. She would go so, so technical. So I understand you when you say like the niche, like she knows her stuff very well. So that I do agree with you. But there are a lot of impacts of your work, like you described, like the empirical form and then the standardization and what it means as far as like every student is also concerned. So definitely that was great. One of the things that people get worried about, which whenever we talk about NIW, is like you need citation. Without citations, you can't get it, right? I've said it over and over again. I've tried explaining it at numerous seminars that yes, citation is great, but it doesn't mean that it is the only way. So I want you to talk about your citation, and then we can move on from there. So like, tell us what was your citation as at the time we were doing the application.
Yeah, I had I think maybe two papers, and then I had two citations or three. No, I think two. I can't remember. I checked
No,
it up
it
this
was
morning, I promise. But I'm blanking out. But I didn't have a lot. I remember at the last minute, we got literally one at the last minute, literally like a week or so, maybe even less than a week or so before somebody had cited a paper. And so we had to like adjust our application. And I was like, so I did not have a lot of citations going in. And like I mentioned at the beginning, everybody says like you need to have publications and have them cited. And so I was very worried about that. I think that's one of the first concerns that we brought up. And we talked about how you were going to address that. And that's one thing I tell people when they ask me, do you think you can help somebody else? And I'm like, no, I would never have assumed like I could, the way you guys addressed it and brought up research to show that in specific fields, specific years, these are the percentages that are set. I'm like, I did not even know that was research that was done. Honestly, I've been in academia, I've worked with professors. We talk about like, the H index, the impact factor of your work and the journals, but I had no idea that the different ranges of publications, citations in different fields and the years. And so I would never have been able to spin my very low citations in a way that still seemed adequate, So I think that was one of the things that I value the most. I was like, even up to now, people, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't trust myself to be like, use the same thing I did, because you were able to drill it down to a very specific standard. You're like, okay, this is her work, this is her field, this is the year her paper was published, and how does this measure up to others in the same field, the same year? And so that was great. And I think that kind of also helped with my confidence at the end of the whole thing, because I did not expect that. I had no idea how we're going to spin that or make that seem good.
definitely. And I'm glad that we were upfront about it. And I would also like to add that yes, citation is important. I wouldn't say anywhere that citation is not important, but citation is not the only way to get EB2 NIW approved. I always use myself as an example that as of the time, that was way back 2021, as of the time that I was doing this process, I had no citations, but still got EB1A and NIW approved. I mean, the whole idea of citation, just to add a little bit, but the whole idea of citation is that someone else is using your work, right? But the way people use people's work is really dependent on a lot of factors, right? So say I publish a paper today, you don't expect, given my field is in the field of stats education, you don't expect that my citation is going to grow extremely exponentially high. It is going to grow, but the rate at which it grows is different, right? So you can't hold that same standards to people like the biological sciences where they get citations like within 2 or 3 months like crazy, right? So everybody is unique, right? And I always even say more recently there was an approval that we got, and the way that we showed citation was to leverage how different companies are using the person's work. So like if you go to Google Scholar, you're not going to see the citation, but your work could be used. For example, maybe you are in the lab, right? And you are doing some stuff with other companies. You are testing products for other people. In a nutshell, that is also citation because people are using your work, except that they are not being cited. In the very case of Nanama, first of all, she's in a field where citation is very problematic. Start math field, they hardly get citation for an extremely outstanding paper. Secondly, most of her papers were published fairly new, like 2023, 2024, even 2022. So we wouldn't hold it high standards, particularly for the field of math. But if we drill it further, she's into EBSTAT, right? Which means that most of her things impact the educational sector. And most of the people that may be using her work wouldn't be citing. So maybe universities may use her work to inform the way to do it. Maybe Pearson, which is a testing service, may would like to leverage some of her product, but they won't come and cite it because they are not publishers, they are not researchers. So I would like to say that on the issue of citation, it differs. It differs, and you can't just say that you need X number of citations. So I would say it and echo it here that if you come and ask me what is the number of citation required for NIW, I don't know because it is not required. It is one of the ways you can make your claim. So that is great that you spoke about it. Now let's talk about we worked for maybe a month. How would you describe our services?
That were great. I really appreciate it. I think I already mentioned like the personal touch, having somebody I could communicate with, be in constant communication with. So we had a lot of back and forth because you mentioned the package I chose was me working and getting feedback from you, working, getting feedback from you. So I think you could have been like, yeah, I'll wait 2 or 3 days and get back to her. I'm busy, but you never did that. Even at the beginning, you were like, can you get this to me end of the day? I'll work on it, get it back to you. And you realized I was very hot. It was like the fall semester, I was like, okay, this is just a lot. And you were like, okay, take your time. Whenever you get it to me, I will get back to you as quickly as I can. And so I really appreciated that you worked with me on my schedule. We school gets, you know, if you're a student, you know how crazy some semesters can get. So I really appreciated that you were like, okay, you give me the luxury of like working when I could, and then but then whenever I got back to you, you were very quick at getting back to me. So I really appreciated that. Again, going back to the idea of being able to ask any question, you know, I knew I could ask. It's like is this very like basic? Is this very stupid? I never felt that way about asking. So I could ask all the questions I wanted. I appreciated the promptness and response, whether it's with the feedback or not. And just yeah, I think those were the very key things that were very helpful. But the whole process went smoothly. I think if there were any delays, they were all on my end. If I got something to you even in 4 days, you get back to me in like a day or like a couple of hours. And so the promptness, you were ready for us to get it out. You're like, okay, we have to get it out by the next week. And I'm like, we could, you know, it's okay if it's the other. You're like, no, we're getting it out by Monday or Tuesday. So I thought you gave me that pressure that if you're a procrastinator, like myself can be, it was a very helpful, like kind of good pressure to have to be like, okay, we can do this by this time. I'm like, oh, we can wait, right? Because yeah, but I really appreciated that. I thought it was very well structured. It felt good. It felt like I was going along with somebody who was leading me in a very helpful, but also understanding that I'm a student and I still have other obligations. So the whole process was great. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed how you can enjoy something as stressful as that, but it was good.
But, first of all, yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm trying so that our head is not swollen, so I'm just gonna keep quiet now. Would you recommend did you find, wait, before we get to the recommendation, did you find the transparency in the whole process? Like, did you felt like we weren't forthcoming, you know? Were you
No,
informed of everything?
I think I definitely was. I think part of transparency on your end, definitely. My problem is that I did not know the scope of, no, the scale of the work. I did not know how big it would get. I did not know how busy it would get. So I wouldn't say it's a transparency issue per se, but I was still caught unaware at a certain point, not because you hadn't said it, because I didn't realize the magnitude of the work, right? Like if somebody had told me I'd be printing as much as I did, I would have been like, no, right? Like, so it was just like, I don't think you ever hit anything, but like the scale of the work and the I knew was important, but I did not realize just how much work necessarily went into. And maybe again, that could be like you said, the package I chose. You have different levels that you provide for other people, and so it's different. But I think if you're going and just realizing that this is huge, it's a big deal, right? It's it's not like because a visa application. I think that's what my mind was. Honestly, my comparison was like a visa application, and I was like, okay, I have done the Canadian visa, I've done the US visa, so I have an idea. I've even done renewing our visa. So like, but it's not the same. The level of work you have to do. So I don't think the transparency was from your end. I came in with expectations, and so that kind of like blocked my view, if it makes sense. But I think you guys, like again, it goes back to like being able to ask any question and realizing, oh, we're still doing this. We have to really do this, and you're like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, that's on me. So I don't think I felt any transparency issues at all.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. Now let's move on to the recommendation. Would you recommend our services to others? And if the answer is yes, why? If the answer is still no, we are still interested in the why.
Yeah. I think you already know. I already have given your number to so many people already. Because people, everybody asks me, like, I have a friend, people will be like, okay, well, you can help, right? I'm like, no, with all due respect, I love you too much to subject you to me who has only done mine and barely saw top to have you help. Like I cannot, like people will ask me, like, what did you say? I'm like, you don't want to do this. You don't want to ask one, like n of one, like no, right?
Yeah,
So I have already I've given so many people, I'm like, please go with this guy. If you want to use a lawyer, that's up to you. But knowing like if your background is similar to mine, I'm like, I've given Rhemma Consults to so many of my friends already who are interested. I'm like, even if you're not sure, just do the consultation. Talk to the experts and see where they stand. Because honestly, even if you end up doing yourself and you pass, thank God, thank your hard work, all of that. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for that. Your your sample size of just you is not something I would recommend you base, like your experience on. So I would not try and do it for anybody, help anybody, because I think it's too big of a deal. And so I definitely have recommended, and I'm going off a tangent, but I have already recommended, and I'll keep recommending. Yeah, because it's worth it. It's worth having experts help you with this.
maybe. I think I wanted to say something. Yeah, good. You mentioned that. Well, thanks for the recommendation. And yes, a lot of people have. In fact, I would like to say the reason why I keep saying that you are one of our esteemed clients is we've had the highest reads, and ever since we made our announcement of having to interview you. So definitely, like we have had so many esteemed clients, but you are one of our esteemed clients. So esteemed of esteemed. But you made mention of the consultation. Some people are here, and I would like you to describe like what was the consultation about? Like what did you get out of the consultation? I say this because there've been a lot of school of thoughts that hey, make the consultation free, but we believe at Rhemma Consult the type of consultation we do is really personal and it's time taking, and so what would you mind sharing what happened at the consultation that you think it's worth considering whether or not you want to move forward with Rhemma Consult?
Yeah, I think it's like I said, people who have opinions. I had done not the same thing. So going back to the idea of like talking to the lawyer, I emailed my CV to the lawyer and he said I was a viable candidate, but he assumed that I knew exactly what that meant. I did not. I had looked online and seen like what was required. You have to have advanced degree, propose endeavor, but like what does that mean when you've not done this before? It doesn't mean a lot. So he said I was a viable candidate, but is that reassuring? Does he just want his money? Because he's still going to get his share whether you get approved or not. So I think I liked your consultation and I'm happy with the way it is structured because it was a meeting, right? A lot of it was just you being like, okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what is involved. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And then giving me the space to ask questions. And so I think I really appreciated that. And maybe it's not necessarily about I don't remember everything. It's been like over a year, but maybe we don't necessarily talk about my qualifications. I think we did a little bit, right? We touched on it. We definitely did. We did. Because I also have a friend that told we touched on my qualifications as well. But I thought it was good for you. I like yours because you laid out exactly what the process was. And again, like I said, you could say whatever you want to say as much as you want to say, but I may not get the whole breadth of it, but it still helped that you laid out. You're like, okay, these are the steps involved. So I remember taking notes like step 1, we had to get like, advanced degree, step 2, this, step 3, step 4. And then we talked about my work. Was I a good candidate? Would this work for me? Or how could we change things around? Or like, what could I do in the meantime to make myself more like a viable candidate or eligible or whatever? And so I think I really appreciate it. I liked it. I think if the alternative is just sending my CV, I would choose yours and choose pain over just having somebody look at my CV and say, this is good. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but for somebody who is new to this, who has not done anything like this, I thought it was a very good first meeting. And so it was worth it. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for sharing that as well. Um, and like I know that we've had a lot of like positive feedback, but one of the things that we at Rhemma Consult, the team here wants to be able to do is better serve the needs of everyone as much as we can. So in what ways do you think we could improve our services to better meet the needs of our esteemed client like yourself?
Yeah, I think I don't know also like to be fair, we met up pretty early and then I took a break because I had some personal issues come up and then I came back and told you I was ready. And so in between that time I had forgotten quite a bit of what we said. So I think if you could maybe having some documentation that you could pass along. But also I also know that sometimes you want to keep things close. I don't know if you, I'm just saying you general, not you, Emmanuel Rhemma Consult. Like I like having something I can refer because I took notes at our consultation meeting, but I forgot a lot of things in between. So I think I like paperwork. I really like paperwork. I like having not to say proof per se to make it sound like it's shady, but I like having paperwork and then okay, this is what I should be looking for. So I think it'll be nice. I don't know if you've been doing that since I met you, because I met with you over a year ago, I think it was summer of 2023 or maybe even earlier. So it could have changed in between that. But maybe some paperwork of like an introductory. This is the steps or something. And also maybe also having the different offers that you have because we spoke and I use money again to decide. And I also thought, I'm fine. I'm a PhD student. I can do this. But I have a friend that will testify to how stressed I was in the last couple of weeks. And so like maybe having necessarily the different tiers of services that you have and exactly what is done in each tier, right? It's like, okay, I will do this, I will do that. You told me, like again, you were very clear about it. Like you will do the work, I will read it. And then as we are going along, and I could have probably switched over at any point. But again, money was my thing. And so I think for me, I like documentation. I like paperwork. I like being something I can go back to, especially with how busy we get. We have meetings, but we forget that we have recordings, so we can come back to. So I think maybe having some sort of documentation to pass around, or maybe like not a timeline per se, but paperwork. It's a lot of work for you, I know, but I think that's one thing I personally would appreciate. But I still think that one of the ways that I didn't struggle not having that was because I had constant access. So I could ask the questions. I could go back and make my own notes again every time I asked a question. But for people who may feel like, I don't want to keep bothering him, which you've never said was a concern, it may alleviate some of that, fear if people have it. But it's a personal preference, but that was one thing I was like, oh, that would have been nice to be able to check again and see. But it didn't detract from my experience at all.
Amma is being too nice. It's okay. Your consent is good. I think it's great. Like, we don't do that. We still don't do that. So it's something we are going to consider. So thank you for sharing. But yeah, I think it's great. So I'm guessing from what you're saying is like after it, like kind of like send an overview of what we discussed with the clients and then what would the next steps be like, right? Rather than just, I think that is doable. That shouldn't take much time. So you see, we're going to change it. So thank you so much for helping the next client that is going to be working with the Rhemma Consult. But yeah, what I would like, I do this all the time. So like, this video is going to be impacted by so many different people. So like, I want you to take a step back and think about somebody who just came to the United States, right? Like maybe this fall, right? The academic is going to start next 2-3 weeks. What would be your advice to someone like that, someone who just came to study that, let's say a master's student? What would your advice be if this person has an intention of applying for the green card?
That's good. I had no idea when I was that phase. I didn't even know that was an option. I would say that if possible, try and get some research experience. Look into smaller conferences in your field. You do not have to do a big, a groundbreaking publishing psychometric, which is like the top journal in our field. But you don't have to do that. Like look into what is more achievable. One of my first conferences I did was on our campus. Our university sends out emails every day about what is going on campus. And I saw one about the National Association of Graduates and Professional Students was being posted on our campus. And we're like, grad students can present on anything. And so I submitted an application. It was like my first conference here. It was here. I didn't have to travel. It was a very small it was my first semester in the US. Very small work that I was doing in class, talking to my professor. So I think definitely being proactive, looking out for research opportunities that are not just the big things, right? If you're in statistics, you don't have to present at JS7 in your first year. It's probably going to be very hard. You don't know much, but like looking for smaller fields. Another one I presented at was women in statistics and data science, because my professor, I had told her, I was like, I'm interested in maybe getting some conferences under my belt or something. So she was like, this is a smaller conference, right? It's women in statistics and data science. And so you're more likely to get in. It doesn't have to be anything too big. And so definitely coming in, you can give yourself some breathing room. I'm not saying do this your first semester here. I got lucky. It wasn't because of anything special. I got lucky if I find that one. They don't host it. They haven't hosted that in our university since then. So I wouldn't be like every year you have that opportunity. But being proactive, right? First of all, looking out for opportunities to do research, talking to your professors, letting them know, I'm interested in doing this. Possibly, if you find anything, can you please send it to me? That's one thing I would really recommend, because like again, I did not have a lot of publications per se, but I did have conferences. I think I have a lot of conferences. My advice is like we need to start spending things around and start getting some papers out. But I have a lot of conferences. And so it's easier to get into a conference and to get a paper published. And so I think just being proactive, if this is something you're interested in, like research is the way to get there. I know there's other avenues. You're probably getting a green card. I'm not an expert. Talk to Emmanuel, but like if you're going to go the way I did, the research is the way you're going to do it. You can start from your first semester, your second semester, but also give yourself, I don't want to sound like when you come, just hit the ground running. It's never too late, right? Even if you're in your last year of your PhD, it's never too late. I don't want to sound like I'm like, start from the beginning. There's always so many smaller avenues that you could present at. Even if you're an undergrad, like the last undergrads here do a lot of research, posters, and I'm always so impressed. We didn't have the opportunity back in Ghana to do a lot of that, or maybe they did, I wasn't aware of it. But you can start small. I hope that doesn't sound very condescending, because I feel bad, because I'm like, I know how I'm stressed about certain things. So I feel bad when I'm like, I feel like I'm tooting my horn on the things I'm good at. But I'm also like, I want to get more papers out. So, like you can find your strengths and then like maximize them. I don't know. But I would say be proactive. Yeah, if research is the way you think you can do this, be proactive. Tell your professors, look for smaller conferences in your field. It doesn't have to even be like in your field necessarily. If it's just a general graduate students conference, get involved in that. Like put your name out there. Just get more involved. I hope this doesn't sound. I'm very bad at stuff like this.
No, I think that's great. And some of the things that I just put up your petition because it's been forever since I worked on yours. So some of the things that you also have that we spoke about is, you had done a lot of reviews for some of these conferences, right? Like,
Yeah.
and those also showed your expertise as well. So like, as Nanama has said, like if you are part of these conferences, you can always volunteer to review some of the manuscripts or the abstracts that comes in, like, where you review for them. Because I always give this funny example of like, if your car gets spoiled, you don't take it to a shoemaker because a shoemaker can't fix your car. Likewise, if your shoe gets spoiled, you can't take it to a mechanic because a mechanic can't fix your shoe, right? So like, it is only an expert that will be called upon. Even if it's a conference, it's only an expert that will be called upon to review the work of their fellow in that field, right? So like, while you're doing these small conferences, volunteer to be serving as a reviewer for some of these conferences. They're great. And of course, a lot of other things we highlighted. And she was also involved in a lot of multi-million-dollar grants. So Nanama is a really esteemed person. So work with, like, just to give you like what I think, if you want to follow her path, what could also help is like get involved with your professors, right? Like maybe they may be working on a grant, volunteer to do analysis for them, and then work with other institutions when available, right? Because that really shows the impact of it. So thank you so much, Nanama, for making the time not only to share this success story, but to inspire other people moving forward, what they can do. Like I always say, I didn't know that I could do this. And if I knew, probably I would have done it so long ago, even before 2020. So it's great that like you are sharing this, and hopefully a lot of people learn from it. And we're going to give the next maybe 10, 15 minutes where like if you have any general questions that I think it should be addressed in Anama, that you get it from a client's perspective, you can ask her. But if it's any question that I need to come in, I'm more than happy to also come in, since as a way of informing everyone, we've worked on a lot of different client backgrounds stemming from statistics, education, agriculture, mathematics, strength, geography. We've been lost track of the different research that we've worked, public health, um, what's it, kinesiology, like energy, sports, science. Like we put a lot of different clients with different backgrounds. So in terms of experience, we've worked with a lot of different people with a lot of citation, people with no citation, people with small citation. So this is an opportunity for you to ask some questions, and then if it's supposed to be addressed in an AMA, that's fine. If not, I'll be more than happy to do that as well.
I think there's some in the comments. Some I think I could probably talk about. Others, I'm not sure. So I'll let you address Bright's comment. I think I had one paper that was under review that had not been published, and I had it on my Vita. We did not necessarily talk. To be fair, I'd also done that as a conference presentation, but I'll let Emmanuel address that. And Prashant, I hope I didn't butcher her name. He's asking if you have a few publications that are not directly linked with the proposed endeavor, how do you demonstrate in the petition? That's one thing that I think we didn't talk about, but it's very like it was very big part of my my petition actually, because we just talk about statistics, the work I do here in education statistics. That's my field and my dissertation, all the work I do. But I also work on a grant with my advisor that does not do a lot of work in this field. There's a confidential grant, so I don't want to go into too much detail. But the work I did there was it's more public health, public opinion. So it's very different from, the statistics and educational work. I still had to do analysis for them because I was a quantitative researcher on that team, or I am a quantitative on that team. But one thing Emmanuel and Rhemma Consult really helped me with was still able to just still the bones of the matter, right? And so it's still statistics because I am a statistician. Whatever I do statistics. It's just not the same field. So we're still able to present the work I did. So it's like that's demographics, something, 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 right? The demographics, we're addressing different subgroups. The topic at hand is public health. It's maybe abortion, maybe it's gun control. We don't necessarily have to talk about that. We'll talk about like the meat of the issue, which is the fact that I'm doing differences in demographic groups. And that kind of work can be applied to education or to other fields. And so what we stuck with was just talking about the part that was relevant to my petition. So if you look at my Google Scholars and details of abortion work, which is not necessarily related to my dissertation, or let's say like the work that I'm passionate about, what I'm to do, it's just my advisors grants. But we're still able to use them because the work I do on that is still quantitative research, it's still quantitative. And so I think that's one thing that we don't necessarily like talk about too much, because the work I do there is very confidential in some ways. But it's one way that Rhemma was able to help me, because if it was up to me alone, I would probably have just stuck with just my dissertation work and education statistics work, but we're still able to merge the two in a way that was cohesive. Because I think one of the things I also said to Emmanuel was like, I do these two things. We can talk about both, but he was like, no, we need to pick a lane and stick with it. But we still managed to get the advantages of the work I had done and move them into this. So I think that's one of the questions that I was like, oh yeah, I can help with that. So the rest of them are a little bit more. I think a university research symposium will still count, definitely. Once you have it on your vita and how you present in your petition. I think one thing about this whole thing is it's a lot of spin work. It's like public relations. It's letting this person know this work is important. They're not going to come to your university and see it's a small research symposium. Like, it's how you present it. It's a lot of public relations, a lot of like big talk. Because the person reading, like Emmanuel used to say, is a lay person. How do we make this easy for them? How do we like lead them to the water? I don't think he ever said that. That's me just saying that. I feel very, how do you lead them to the water? So it's not too small. It's still very good. And I think if you've done other work that are not directly, you still have to pick a lane, it looks like. I'll let him talk more about that and stick to that. But you can still pick things because you are still the one who's in both of them, right? Whatever common thread, it's in both of them. You can fish it out and add it to strengthen your petition. So yeah, I think the rest are a little bit more technical, but
Somebody asked, oh, okay. So yeah, I think, okay, somebody asked another question. Do you help with recommendation letters? I think that you should be able to answer.
yes. I mean, you do help. I don't know if I'm necessarily gonna, because I had people I could ask. He says he cannot find independent. She said if he cannot find independent
Oh,
recommenders. Yeah, you help because I already came with. I spoke to professors. You were like, okay, this is a good person, but I think this is it's a different kind of question.
I think for the first question, yes, we would help
Yes.
you draft the letters for
Mhm.
anybody who is willing to give you a letter of recommendation. For the people who cannot find independent recommenders in your field, well, for that it will boil down to you for the most part, right? Well, what I've done in the past is it depends, right? So let's say if your paper have been cited, that is, if you have research, the first thing that we do here at Rhemma Consult is to give you a list of all the people that have cited your work, and then give you a draft of how you can reach out to them. And then that would be my first point of help for you. Is like, okay, I went to Google Scholar, I saw that you have 10 citations, meaning 10 people may have cited your work. Out of those 10 people that may have cited your work, maybe each paper had 4 different authors. So maybe say 40 people. So my first thing would be, let's reach out to all the 40, because those people haven't worked with you directly. They only know you because of your work that you have used in their research. So that would be the first way I would recommend. And if you don't have research, the other ways that I would say, if you don't have citation, the other ways is like, sometimes you need to reach out to like your professors and talk to them like, hey, I'm about to do this. Like, are you willing to like connect me to someone who is willing to write the letters, because they are the experts in your field, and they would have worked with a lot of different institutions and different people who may not have worked with you directly, but giving your link, and they will be open to, hey, bring your CV, write something about you, and let me review it and tell the officer that, hey, I haven't worked with you personally, But based on the CV of this client and based on some of the projects this client have done, this is my honest opinion about this person's expertise and what it means as far as the United States is concerned. So I think that is the kind of help that we can offer beyond like writing the recommendation letters. So, and is it possible to apply from outside the US? The answer is yes. Like if one of the things that I've always said is like if you go back to our YouTube channel, there is one person, Kofi Ansah, who came all the way from Ghana. And and that was because we did application when he was in Ghana and he just came. So it doesn't matter where you are. And we've also had a client all the way from Nigeria as well. So it doesn't matter where you are. It's more or less like, do you meet the requirements? If you meet the requirements, USCIS is going to have to approve your application. And if you think about immigration, the whole idea of immigration is, in a real sense, you are really not in the country. You want to immigrate to the country. So it is actually done for people who are outside of the country wanting to come in. Just that some people are already in, and then they just have to just adjust from being a non-immigrant to an immigrant, like what Nanama is doing. So how many recommendation letters do you recommend for someone without publication? This question is always difficult. No, that's the thing. Like and that is my fear about why there are a lot of myths about national interest waiver in EB1. I can't tell you that you need 5 letters of recommendation. I can't say that. I can't even say you need 4. I can't say you need 3. Why? Because it depends on each individual's case, right? So like everybody is unique. Even if we have an exact researcher from University of Arkansas in working with Nanama, her case is going to be, his or her case is going to be different from that of Nanama's, because like Nanama's achievement is different from that person's achievement. So unless I've seen the whole of a client's profile, I'm always careful about, you need 2 letters, you need 3 letters. But one of the things that I will be upfront and say is this: the idea of sending out too much recommendation letters signals that your case is a weaker case, right? Because recommendation letters itself, if you think about it from a very objective stand, it is a very subjective evidence, because this is taking a letter from somebody you may know, or even you already have a copy of the letter, right? So if somebody sends you a bad stuff about yourself, I don't think you're going to add it to the petition to begin with. So even though the officers use recommendation letters, it doesn't carry as much weight as people think it does. It depends on how we tell the story. So for example, so to answer your question, I can't tell you how many recommendation letters one person needs without a publication. And Nama, do you remember how many letters we used for your case? I don't remember. Do
I
you?
used 3. I ended up getting 4, but we thought 3 was gonna be better.
Okay, so we used 3. There's been a case of like, you can go back to our unit, like Dr. Abuaje that we did. I didn't use any letters of recommendation. So I can't tell you yes, I can't tell you no. It just depends on the case and how we are building the case, right? Like for example, like I said, I see letters of recommendation to be very subjective, unless it is coming from people who haven't worked with you. Those are the letters that sometimes I feel it's a little bit objective, but too much of like taking letters from people you know, too much of it is just making it seem like you don't have a case, right? So let's, like, for example, because Nanama is here, I'm going to pick on her. Like she had a lot of different awards, right? Like she had a DAF award in University of Arkansas. And if you've been in University of Arkansas, the DAF is a big thing, right? Like it goes through a lot before it's been awarded. Aside that, she had a lot of different awards, and each award had the criteria for which they were selected that indicated these awards are based on excellence, right? So there are other ways to make a case without necessarily just submitting letters of recommendation. So to answer your question, unfortunately, I can't tell you you need X number of because there is no such thing as X number of recommendations for this whole process. Hopefully, I wasn't condescending and it helps your question.
Sorry
Sorry for
to cut
mistakes.
in. I think that was good, but I also wanted to say some of the awards that I have were conference travel awards. And so one of the smaller in quote, the smaller national conference is still reputable. It was like the Women's Statistics and Data Science. If I apply, you get in, they'll put out a call for people that need help getting the travel conference award. So I have a bunch of those as well. So not everything has to be, an award that sounds like a huge deal. It's good because first it helps you get to the conference, and then second of all, you can put it on Vita because they don't just pick anybody. Your work has to be good, and then they pick you. That's one thing you can also look out for. Conference travel awards. It's a really a good way to get money and help to get to the place you're going, and also another recommendation or whatever.
Perfect. I think most of and all of the questions.
I think there was one about the timeline from start to receiving. I don't know if it also
Uh,
depends, and maybe the one
no,
about the under review.
yeah. So let's start with the one under the review. Where are you? Can you mention that your paper is under review but not published yet? Yeah, you can mention. So those are things you can add as part of your future plans, right? These are things, for example, like Nanama is going to keep doing her research for the United States. That's why we're using. So like as part of your future plans, like we can mention that, oh, I plan to keep doing research A and B. As a matter of fact, I have currently even submitted 2 papers. The under review. This is the proof. I submitted it on this day. You go to your portal, you show it, right? So these are things all showing that continuation of your research is still eminent in your life, right? So yes, you can add it, but it just depends on the context, right? Like, so if you're adding it and you're adding it as future plans, that is very solid than making noise about it in your achievements, right? So it just depends on where you are making noise about it. So hopefully that answered your question. The timeline. I think how about Nanama answer the timeline till when she got the I-140 approved, and then I'll answer the rest. How about that? So like
Yeah.
Nanama, can you speak to like when we submitted and when you got the result?
So we started working maybe November thereabouts. We finally, again, most of the delays was on me, or maybe December, probably after, because it was late November, December. And then we submitted the final thing February 2nd or thereabout, first week in February. And so I didn't hear anything, but then the money, because you submit, you pay, money went through. So I knew they had gotten the thing. And then I looked on the portal, they said as of February 27th, we have received or we are, I don't know what they said exactly, but as of February 27th, we are looking at your application or something. That was it. I didn't hear anything till July 8th is when it got approved. So February to July, March, April, May, June, 5 months approximately. And then
I would like to say that I don't know, but there's something in Arkansas. I could be wrong. Nanama is not my only client in Arkansas, but there's something in Arkansas that makes the approval comes a little bit faster because they tend to get the approval a little bit faster because 5 months is usually on the most earliest side. Ideally, right? If all things are being equal, then we are considering the average. Nanama, correct me if I'm wrong, since you are the statistician. Most of the times, it takes about 9 months to get an approval if you don't do premium processing. But there are outliers, like Nanama's case is an outlier. I personally, would not have suspected that she should get an approval as early as 5 months. If it came after 6 months, that's fine. But usually I see 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months. That is if you don't use premium processing, which Nanama didn't use. She did the regular processing. So it's just dependent on that. But to answer why it can take 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, it just depends on the officer who is adjudicating your case, right? Some of them have a lot of law and work loads, and some of them, depending on how they prioritize these workloads, you may or may not hear earlier. But in general, like within 6 to 12 months, if you don't do a premium processing, that is the most natural timeline. Nanama's own was a little bit earlier, and that could just mean the officer had less work or prioritized EB2 over some of the different classifications he or she was looking at. So that is up to the stage that we worked on. With regards to the next steps, so the next step, say if we did the second stage, so now that Nanama is done, we're going to work with Nanama to do where we actually have to adjust her. So she's currently an F1 student. So she's on F1 visa. So we now have to move her from an F1 to permanent residency. Like she needs the card itself. So if we put in the application tomorrow, and that is not the case, but I'm just giving timeline. So say if we put in an application tomorrow for Nanama, given the timelines and everything that is going on, we are looking at roughly maybe between 6 to 12 months, depending on like the officer's schedule, the number of cases they have. I have seen somebody get after putting in the application for the adjustment of status, which is the I-485, I've seen somebody get an approval within 1 month. I've also seen somebody get an approval within 18 months or within 12 months. But the good thing is that while you are waiting for the adjustment of status, you are given what we call the EAD, which is the employment authorization document, to be able to work anywhere in the United States. You're also given, or you're entitled to, if you apply for it, what we call the advanced parole. So let's say if some reason you wanted to travel out of the country and go for a conference, like maybe in Canada, or go for conference anywhere, you don't need a visa back, and you just need your advanced parole. You go in and you come with your advanced parole. So those are the things. But so when you get a green card itself, it's a little bit determinant on the schedule of USCIS. They have a lot of applications, they adjudicate, but in any case, while you are waiting for the green card itself, you get your EAD and then you get your advanced parole, which allows you to kind of get all the benefits of a green card holder, except that you would not be having the card itself. So hopefully that kind of answered your question, but I can't tell you 2 months. I can't tell. The thing is, when you are working with USCIS, it's difficult to say you get a result in 2 days, you get a result in 3 days. No, because even for premium processing, they promise 45 days. There are some times I've seen a client, they get an approval in 3 days. Sometimes I've seen a client for premium processing, they get an approval on the 44th day. So there is no like exact science with USCIS that you're going to get it today, you're going to get it. The best will be a range. So hopefully I answered your question correctly, Franklin. And there are maybe two more. Phyllis, that's it. Okay. Oh, comment. I reserve my comments. I reserve my comments.
Allow her. Allow her.
I
I'm
should.
taking the
Okay.
compliment. Thank you.
Oh, okay. But that's so Felice, that's the I don't look nice. My hair is not nice. Okay. Thank you so much for telling me that my hair is not nice. That's the publication of your abstract in a research such as Geographical Society of America counts towards. Yes, it does count. In fact, you just said the Geological Society of America. So it's for an organization where they are interested in the geological stuffs of America. Yes, it does count. In fact, most conferences is kind of related to an association. Like I'm yet to see conferences that is. I mean, there could be conferences that is not linked to an association, but generally when we say conference, it is an association of so and so, right? So for example, like in the education field, we have the AERA, right? So we have the Association of Educational Researchers. We have like NCUR, National Council of Undergraduate Researchers. Like usually almost every conference, sometimes or for the most times, is associated with some form of a group. So yes, it's counts. And that is what a conference is all about for the most part. if it's not a national group, it is an international group. So it's one or the other, right? So like we have PMENA in the educational field, like psychology of maybe math education. There are a lot of different, so yes, it counts. In fact, I just want to say conferences are just related to associations for the most part. Like there could be a conference that is not, but 80% of the time, if someone says I have a conference presentation, it's an association that we are sharing our research and trying to make an impact in our field. So yes, long story short, it counts. I didn't see the last comment. So that being said, I think thank you all for your time again. Like I always say, even if you are in the early stages or the late stages, it is important to consider thinking about NIW, seek counsel. I'm not just saying this because of like come to Rhemma, but we are all like, I was an international student some few years ago, and I wish I had an opportunity like this where like I was enlightened by the information. So this is no me saying come to Rhemma Consult. Even if you want to go somewhere else, like consider doing it and doing that early so that you could potentially benefit from it much earlier than most of the times. That being said, it's nice having you all here, and then hopefully we get to see each other somehow, conference anywhere, meets in some weird places. But thank you, Nanama, our esteemed client, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to analyze this interview, and hopefully, just like you heard from seminar, somebody gets an approval or inspiration to move forward with his or her process as well. Thank you, and then bye for now.